Today we're talking about how to design a stunning garden planter using one of my favorite formulas, the thriller, filler, and spiller method. Let's break it down. Welcome to the Garden Gamble, where we're planting hope, taking chances, and growing memories for every season. I'm Ricki, owner of Clausen's Greenhouse in northern Minnesota. This podcast is for anyone who's ever stood in the garden, greenhouse, or backyard wondering if they're doing it right. Here we talk real-life gardening, the wins, the mistakes, and everything we learn along the way. Whether you're new to plants or have dirt permanently under your nails, you're in the right place. Let's take the gamble and grow together. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Garden Gamble podcast. We officially launched the podcast or started promoting it on social media this past week. So if you're new to the podcast, listening for the first time, welcome. And if you've been listening now since the beginning, I'm so glad that you're still here with us. I've just been so excited to have this podcast kind of take off so I can share our message with you guys a little bit better and a little bit more in-depth content that you can kind of consume on your own time in the car. Like for me, I listen to podcasts like when I'm watering plants on my drive to daycare. So we're just excited to be able to provide this podcast for you on topics that can help you be a more successful gardener. So we're just really pumped that the podcast is out there now on YouTube and on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. We've heard a lot of great feedback and people that are so excited that we are doing this, and so am I. I'm so excited. Today, I'm even more excited that we get to talk about one of my favorite topics, container design, using the thriller, filler, and spiller method. This week, I'm going to be doing a lot of containers here at the greenhouse. We have a lot of people that bring in containers for custom plantings, for graduations, and for other events that they may have in the summer where they want to pick up like a finished product for those events so they look nice and full come graduation or weddings. We've done some for weddings, or maybe you just like that look for your own yard. You just like having it done for you, which is totally fine. This is my jam. This is my bread and butter. I love container gardening. If you can quiz me on all sorts of questions. I could yap about this topic for a long, long time. I'm recording this episode on April 9th, and here in northern Minnesota, we actually just got a whole bunch of snow yesterday on April 8th. So it might not look like spring outside here at our greenhouse. It is coming. I promise spring is coming, but it is kind of crazy to think that a lot of greenhouses further south, even like southern Minnesota and further south from that, even they're already opening their doors. They're thinking about gardening, and we just got snow here in the north. So gardening can look a little different just depending on where you're at. But up here in northern Minnesota, we still have snow on the ground. It's about mid-April, and that's what we're still dealing with. But I'm going to try to look at it in a more positive light. We're getting some good moisture. My kids are pumped about it. As it's melting, we have puddles all over the yard, and they are so jazzed about all of the puddles. They don't care. They don't mind getting all muddy and dirty. They very much enjoy it. So I'm going to try to just have a better mindset about the snow because there's nothing I could do about it. But here at the greenhouse, we are very much looking forward to spring, and we open on May 1st, which it is crunch time. The days are getting down there for us to get all this behind the scenes work done, so we are ready for you guys to come visit the greenhouse here really, really soon. And yes, one of those things that is on our to-do list is doing up more custom planters and just having fun with that. One of my favorite things to do, which maybe my husband doesn't appreciate, is I love shopping for the different containers and planters. I absolutely love it. Finding different sizes, different colors, different textures. It's so much fun. It's maybe that's maybe my shopping addiction is buying planters. So I guess there's worse things, but that's what I really like. And I get to set them out for you guys to enjoy when you come out to Clausen's greenhouse too. We have a really awesome selection of planters to choose from. So then today after the podcast, you're going to just feel so inspired, right? And come out and plant your own planter or pick up one of the ones that I'll be doing later this week and into next week. All right, so let's jump into it. Today I'm going to kind of break it down into 3 different steps and talk a lot about what thriller, filler, spiller means. It's a really easy formula, and you may be thinking, I've heard this before, this is easy peasy, but this formula, this method really applies to not only containers, but in a lot of gardening in general. I use this formula as a very similar idea even when I'm doing perennial gardens, so you can definitely use it in more than just containers. I also use a very similar method even when I'm creating bouquets from the flower farm. It's just a simple design method that helps make a more complete and well-rounded, well-balanced arrangement. So let's start at the beginning. Step 1, choose the right container. So before you pick your plants, we're going to select a container, one of those really awesome ones that I pick out and have for you. Choose the right container. You're going to pick one that suits your space and your style. And one of the main things that you need to look for when you pick up containers, whether it's at our greenhouse or ones you have at home or at a hardware store, wherever you're getting your containers, make sure it has drainage holes. Lots of them don't come pre-drilled or have those holes in them already, so please check. It's really easy to just pop a couple holes in the bottom. But healthy roots do not like sitting in soggy soil, so you make sure that there's a place for that excess water to go. All right, with your pot too, you want to consider the size. The larger the pot, the more room you have for your plants to grow, and the less often you have to water, which if you're like me, watering like in the summertime, like after the greenhouse closes, I'm horrible at watering. So if I can get a bigger container and I can water it deeply and thoroughly every other day rather than every day, because we're busy, we've got kids, we've got lots of things going on, so the less watering I have to do, the better. So the bigger the pot, the more or the less watering you have to do, and also the more plants you get to put in there, which I think is kind of fun when you get to play with more plants and put different things together. All right, so you've chosen the right container. Now let's move on to step 2. You get to pick your plants, the fun part of it. This is where the thriller, filler, and spiller method come in, and it's all about creating that visual impact from every angle. So the thriller, let's start with that one. The thriller, this is your showstopper. It's the focal point. It's the plant that stands tall and draws attention. It usually will go in the center if you're working on it with a round pot, or towards the back of a container if you're only viewing it from one side. So if you are putting it up by your front door and you're only seeing it from the front, you're going to put that thriller towards the back of your container. Where if you have it out in your yard and you're going to see it from all angles, put that thriller right in the center of your pot. Thrillers are adding height, structure, and that little bit of drama. It is your showstopper. Some thriller examples would be the classic spike, the Dracaena spike. It's just the green spiky plant. Fountain grass, you can do canna lilies, upright coleus, salvia. A lot of this will depend, like which thriller you pick out will depend on the size of your pot too. Where like fountain grass, like rubrum, purple fountain grass is very, very large grass, so you need a large container for that one. Where the spike sits nice and tall but doesn't necessarily take up a ton of room, so it can go in a somewhat mid-sized to smaller container if you want. Some other ones that I occasionally use for a thriller, like for flowers, I use osteospermums, agaranthemums. Those are both 2 like daisy looking plants that sit up a little bit taller. I like to use those ones in some smaller containers because they're not crazy tall, but adds just enough height to be considered a thriller in a small container. All right, now let's move on to the filler. This is going to be your middle part of your pot. These plants surround the thriller and fill in the body of the container with color and texture. They're usually mounded or slightly spreading, and they just help tie your arrangement together. Some filler examples would be petunias, calibrachoa, begonias. You could use osteospermum as a filler too. Geraniums. The filler options are pretty endless. Lobelia, I use that quite a bit as a filler. They're just filling in that middle part of your container and surrounding that thriller. Now, the number of fillers that you use and where you put them very much depends on where your thriller is. Where most of the time, if you have your thriller more towards the back, like it's up against your front door, I'm putting those fillers right in front of it and kind of around it there. Usually 2, maybe 3, depending on your pot size. Where if your thriller is right in the center, you might be looking at 3 or 4 to kind of surround that thriller from all angles. So the number just very much depends on where your thriller is and how big your pot is. Now the next one is the spiller. This is your trailing. It's spilling out the sides. These plants drape over the edge of the container, kind of softening the lines and creating lots of movement in your container. They give your planter that lush and overflowing look. When doing container designs, it really is kind of like an art form. You'll notice that a lot of the words that I'm using in the podcast today, you may hear in different artistic settings, but it's true. It is a different art form. This is why I enjoy it so much. I get to use my creative side when creating containers, and I really enjoy it. So some spiller examples, some real classics. You have a sweet potato vine, creeping jenny or lismachia. You can use bacopa, dichondra, silver falls, trailing lobelia. There's so many different options. Catmint, wandering Jew. Oh, there's lots of different ones that you can choose from. Now the spiller and filler, there are a few that kind of can work as both, like some trailing petunias. Sometimes I'll use calibrachoa or callies as kind of a filler and a spiller as a dual purpose there. Lots of the spillers that I typically use that are going to drape a long ways over the edge of your pot are going to be more foliage types like the creeping jenny or lismachia, the sweet potato vine, the silver falls. There's a lot of different options, but most of the time when I want it to drape a long ways, it's going to be more of like a foliage type. One of my other newer-ish favorites has been lophis or lophospermum. It's kind of like a trumpet-shaped bloom that trails really beautifully out of like baskets and containers. I like putting those as a spiller in hanging baskets because the hummingbirds love them, and it's just a really beautiful flower. So there you've got your thriller, you've got your filler, and you've got your spiller. Kind of a tongue twister. I hope I said that right. After you say it a few times, you're like, did I say the same one twice? I'm not sure. A few things to keep in mind as you are working on your containers is sunlight. Make sure that your plant choices match your light conditions, whether that's full sun, part sun, or shade. Make sure you're picking plants that work well together and work well in the spot that you're going to be putting your container. We want you to have the best success. So make sure that you are reading those tags when you get to the greenhouse or garden center and finding things that will work well together in your containers. All right, now step 3 is to design and plant. Fill your container with some high quality potting mix, leaving about an inch or so on the top. Now I have a lot of people that ask me, well, can I reuse the soil in my pot that I had from last year? And The answer is yes or no. I personally think that starting fresh with new potting soil is going to be the best for your plants, because after a full season of rooting in and growing, most of the time in a container, that dirt is pretty root bound. It's full of roots, and you want your new plants in there to have that space to root themselves and not be working around last year's stuff. It can also carry over if you had issues with disease or anything in your pots the previous year. Definitely start over fresh, sanitize it if you can, and go from there. So I personally recommend starting fresh each year. If you want to save a little bit of money, I would at least do 50-50 at a minimum, where you kind of work up last year's roots, take out at least the top section, and kind of mix in with some new potting mix. All right, so you've added potting mix to your container. First, you're gonna plant your thriller, then arrange your fillers around it. Then you're gonna tuck your spillers along the edge so they can trail down as they grow. Once you're happy with your arrangement, plant everything in and water in very thoroughly. So after your planting, here's just a few care tips going forward. To keep your plants thriving, follow these simple care guidelines. So watering, container gardens do dry out faster than garden beds. So check daily in hot weather, stick your finger in the soil. You can, if you have a smaller container, you can even just give it a lift and feel it by weight. We do that a lot, especially with our hanging baskets. We go by weight more often than just sticking our finger in the soil. If it feels dry, at least an inch or more down, it's time to water. Now be very thorough with your watering. You want to water very deeply. Don't just give it a little sprinkle. Water it very deeply, but not to the point where it's running through and draining out the bottom, where you might hear that from other people or other garden influencers, I guess, but you really don't want it constantly draining out the bottom, because then those roots that are eventually make it down to the bottom, lots of times they are sitting in soggy soil for a long time, and they're not getting that chance to kind of dry out and get some oxygen in there. So, and if you're wasting water, you're wasting fertilizer if you're using water soluble fertilizer when you wait for it to drain out the bottom. So you want to water it deeply, but not to the point where it's watering and water running through your container. Now, if you've forgotten about your container, or it's very hot and that soil has pulled away from the edge of the pot, a lot of the soil that we use here at the greenhouse will shrink, so it'll pull away from the edge of the pot. So if you go to water it, that water is just going to basically bounce off the soil initially and just run out the sides and down through it. It's not actually taking in any water. So if that happens to you, if it's pulled away from the edge of the pot, water it once, let the soil expand, so give it some time, then come back and water again very thoroughly. Lots of times if I notice that, I'll give it that first initial water, go through and do that for all the containers that I have, come back and then do it all again. Now for fertilizing, containers need regular feeding to stay vibrant. I suggest using a water-soluble fertilizer about once a week, and then you can mix in slow-release fertilizer at planting time. Now that slow-release fertilizer is not a replacement for water-soluble, it's just in addition to. So if you have a few days where you are not watering, let's say it's very cloudy, it's not using as much moisture, that slow-release fertilizer is going to kind of help bridge the gap in between your water-soluble fertilizer feedings. And maintenance. So you want to deadhead some spent blooms to encourage new flowers, pinch back any leggy growth to help keep things tidy, and if needed, not always, but if needed, rotate your container occasionally for even sun exposure. So pretty easy. If you want some
tips when you're at the greenhouse for more low maintenance plants, things that go well together, feel free to ask. Like I said, this is my favorite topic, container gardening. So feel free to ask me if you're out at the greenhouse. I would love to show you lots of options that will meet your needs. And one last tip, don't be afraid to experiment with color and texture. Mix some bold reds with some chartreuse greens and play with contrasting leaf shapes. Garden planters are the perfect place to show off your creativity. If you're ready to get your hands dirty, we do open on May 1st. We would love for you to stop out at our greenhouse or attend one of our planter workshops. Usually once or twice a year, I will put on a workshop based on this thriller, filler, spiller concept where you get to come out and you get a little more one-on-one help with me or some others here at the greenhouse. So we'd love for you to come to one of our workshops. So keep an eye on those events in the future. And we've got everything that you need here to create a beautiful planter that turns heads all season long. So thank you for listening to today's podcast. If you enjoyed this, I would very much appreciate it if you could leave us a review, share this with your friends, and get the message out there so we can help more people take the gamble out of gardening. We will see you next week. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on The Garden Gamble. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a fellow plant lover. Gardening isn't a gamble when you have the right guidance and you don't have to figure it out alone. Until next time, take care.